Hey, how's it going? Before we jump into the content, I just want to take a minute to thank you for stopping by the channel and checking out the content. If you like this content and you want to support more content like it, then make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. You can also check out the YouTube membership program and cybertrainingpro.com, where I put practice exams and other things that I couldn't put on YouTube. Again, regardless of how you support the channel and my content, I couldn't be more appreciative. Thank you so much, and let's get into the content. Bad things occasionally happen in organizations, like security breaches or hacking attacks. When these types of things happen, we need a process called incident response to help us appropriately respond to handle these issues. Incident response policies describe how to respond to incidents, and they identify key personnel that are involved. Security incidents are some adverse event or series of events that negatively affect the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of data or systems in an organization. One of the most common security incidents is a data breach. This is where unauthorized people or systems have access to data. For example, you might hear about companies getting breached and their customer data gets exposed on the internet. Data breaches can also be malware, cyber attacks, or a number of other events. The key is that once a security incident is identified, our incident response policy and plan kick into action. In addition to what we're about to cover, I recommend checking out the NIST Special Publication 800-61, which covers computer security incident handling. Incident response plans provide more detailed information than an incident response policy about how personnel will respond to an incident. IR plans include definitions of incident types, basically what is an incident response team, who are the members of the team, and roles and responsibilities. Which roles are responsible for what? For example, is the network administrator responsible for dealing with the firewalls? Having a communication plan during an incident is critical to communicate throughout the team. For example, you don't want somebody to mistakenly speak with the media and say information that they're not supposed to. In your communication plan, you should include details regarding first responders. They need to know who to contact to initiate incident response. Typically, these are going to be members of areas like the help desk. Internal communication, because the team and senior management typically need to know about all incidents. Reporting requirements are important if there's laws or requirements to report certain types of incidents. External communication, such as how to deal with the media or the public. You might have to release a statement if you have a significant data breach. Law enforcement, again, depending on the magnitude or the type of the incident, you might need to communicate with law enforcement. And customer communication, either as part of transparency or because certain laws require customers to be notified when their data is exposed. There's several steps or phases to the incident response process that you need to know about. The first step is preparation. This is before an incident ever happens and involves creating policies, procedures, gathering the tools, and everything that needs to be in place if an event ever happens. The second step, identification, involves validating if an event is actually classified as an incident. We don't want to complete an entire incident response process for events that should have never been considered incidents in the first place. Third, we have containment. This means that we try to isolate or contain an incident. We might take a system offline, stop traffic flow out of an area of the network. Ultimately, we need to keep things from getting worse. If you had a pipe burst in your house, would you shut off the water first before cleaning up, or would you just start cleaning up? The fourth step is eradication. This is when we actually start resolving the incident and removing malware, deleting accounts, or whatever steps are necessary to eliminate the incident. Fifth is recovery, and that means we're focused on returning the affected systems back to normal operation. That might mean to restore systems, install patches, or completely rebuild those systems. And then we have lessons learned. This is the final phase, and it involves making sure that everything that happened is documented and identifying any areas that we can improve. IR process is a continuous improvement process where we actually try to do it better every single time. As you can see on the screen, I've highlighted the letters of the phase to make the phrase PICERL, P-I-C-E-R-L, that will help you remember the steps. A growing trend in cybersecurity is to automate whenever possible. This is really due to the fact that we see so many security issues and alerts that if we can't automate routine, low-level events, then we'll never catch the serious stuff. The goal of SOAR, or Secure Orchestration, Automation, and Response, is to respond to low-level security events automatically with tools. Playbooks are basically a checklist that tells the SOAR platform what to look for to identify if something's an issue. For example, we might have a playbook for phishing emails. Runbooks are the action or actions that are taken based on what playbooks find. For example, if we have a playbook that finds a phishing email, our runbook might quarantine or delete that email. Runbooks could also generate alerts for follow-up before any action is taken. After an incident takes place, digital forensics techniques allow us to collect evidence and analyze it further. Sometimes the evidence is going to be used in court, but other times we might just want to use it and get better at what we do. In this section, we're going to discuss the key things that you need to know when it comes to digital forensics. If our digital forensics evidence is going to be used in court, it's extremely important that you follow the proper procedures. Otherwise, that evidence is going to be thrown out and the defense is going to go free. When we first start out collecting evidence, we won't actually know that it'll end up in court, but we've got to assume that it's going to. Also, one of the key things that we're trying to do is make sure that our evidence supports non-repudiation, meaning that whoever did something in the incident can't deny that they did it. Just like with law enforcement evidence, anything that we collect needs to be tagged. This includes date and time, a control number, and the name of who's placing the tag on it. Chain of custody is a process that provides assurances that evidence has been collected and appropriately handled after its collection. Basically a record of who's been in possession of or accessed that evidence. Without a good handle on chain of custody and having it documented, it's much harder to prove that evidence hasn't been modified or altered. Legal holds are court orders to maintain different types of data as evidence. For example, if there's a lawsuit regarding a financial dispute between your company and the government, you might be required to store that data for the court proceedings. Data retention policies are important here too, because if the legal hold is for data in the last 2 years, but your written data retention policy says to delete information after 6 months, then you wouldn't be in trouble with regards to that legal hold. Once a legal hold's in place, if you start deleting information, then things start to look like a cover-up. Imagine too that if you were unnecessarily storing extra data and you received a legal hold, your data storage expenses are going to increase more than you anticipated, even more so if you can't identify where the related data is stored. Let's talk about some common evidence types that you need to know about. The first type is video surveillance, and that's a great form of evidence because if we can identify the person in the video, then it's hard for them to dispute whatever they were doing. I guess there's always the attempt to use the twin defense, but it won't work. Interviews play an important role during investigations. Witnesses can provide first-hand statements of what happened. Unfortunately, witnesses might not know which information is important, and they might also not come forward to help unless they're asked to do so. Event logs are another piece of evidence that can help us recreate events leading up to and during a security incident. Luckily, systems, applications, network appliances, and all other forms of technology that we use are going to collect logs with accounts, timestamps, and other useful types of information. It's very important that systems have solid authentication processes in place because otherwise it's harder to link specific activity back to an individual. Any kind of digital forensics investigation needs to result in a final report of the findings. It's extremely important that the report is accurate and easy to follow for both internal use and if the report needs to be used in court. Some common things that you'll see in this report include an executive summary of the findings and recommendations, the forensics tools that were used, the evidence collected and analyzed, which might include digital hashes for things like hard drives, the findings or the things that were found from each piece of evidence, and recommendations based on the findings. Like a lot of things, services on premises provide us more control, but we lose some of that control when we start putting things up in the cloud. The main issue is that we don't exactly know where our data is stored, other than it's in the cloud service provider's data center. Right to audit clauses are a great thing to include in contracts with your service providers because it gives you the ability to hire an auditor and review the cloud provider's records. This gives us assurance that the cloud provider is implementing adequate security controls in their environment. Many cloud providers have data centers either across their country of operation or potentially across the world in different countries than their headquarters. One of the issues with this is that the regulatory jurisdiction changes and you have to comply with the laws of the country based on where your data sits. Data breach notification laws require companies to notify customers about a data breach and take steps to mitigate the loss. Sometimes these laws have a time requirement for notification, like within 45 days, but they might also have a requirement based on the amount of individuals or records that are breached, like 20,000 individuals. Additionally, law enforcement might step in for an investigation and require a company to hold off on notifying customers. We've already discussed a little bit about following appropriate procedures when it comes to digital forensics and both collecting and analyzing evidence, but let's talk more specifically about it. Order of volatility is an important factor when determining which evidence that we need to collect and in what order. The general idea is that you should start with the most volatile data and move towards the least volatile. You can see on the screen here that I've included the order of volatility from most volatile to least volatile. Starting out with cache, from memory, the processor, and the hard drive because this data is removed as new data is used. We then have RAM, which is data used by the operating system and applications. Then swap or page file. This is an extension of RAM, but it's stored on the hard drive and rebuilt when the system restarts. Disk, meaning data stored on the hard drives that remains there after a reboot. Attached, meaning memory and devices like USB flash drives that maintain data after the system's powered down. And network storage, this typically has more extensive backup policies than a local system, so it's less likely that this data is just going to go away. Data can come from a variety of sources within memory. Think about all the places that an operating system might store data. Some examples include web history, like where an account's visited, the recycling bin, including what's currently in there and what's been deleted. Windows error reporting will show which programs were running when a system crashed. Application cache, like remote desktop protocol cache, that shows if an attacker connected to that system or connected to another system using a victim computer. And the Windows registry can potentially show traces of malware, especially if the malware was set to start when that system boots up. When it comes to forensics, there's specialized tools that help us not only collecting data, but also to preserve that data from being altered. One of the first steps when collecting forensics data is to create a forensics image, which is literally an exact copy of that system. That means the cache, RAM, and entire disk drives are copied. This is crucial because we only want to analyze the copy and never start running tools against the real system so we don't alter anything. Some of the common tools include DD, which is short for Data Duplicator, and it's available on both Linux and Windows, and it can create images of disks. Memdump, which is short for memory dumper, it's found on Kali Linux, and it's used to dump memory to either the terminal or an output file. WinHex, which is a Windows-based hexadecimal editor to work with memory. FTK Imager, which is included in the Forensics Toolkit or FTK suite, and it can create images of a disk or specific files and folders. And finally, Autopsy, which allows users to add command line utilities from the Sleuth Kit to analyze systems. One of the important things that goes along with creating a copy of a system is capturing a hash or a checksum. This gives us a value that's going to be the exact same unless there's a change. If there's any change to that data, hard drive, system, then the value when we run the hash or the checksum is going to be different. By taking a hash or a checksum, we have the ability to trace the copy back to its original form. This is huge for court proceedings. The tools that we just mentioned, like DD, will allow you to run a hash against the original drive and the copy drive to make sure it's the same value. E-discovery or electronic discovery is the identification and collection of electronically stored information. This means information like voicemails, website data, and the list goes on and on. The collection process commonly uses digital forensics processes to collect that data because the metadata is also really important. Some common metadata includes file metadata, like who created the file, when it was created, and when it was last accessed. Email metadata, like headers, who sent the email and when they sent it. Web metadata, like web page headers, web page titles, and anything added by the developers in the meta tag. And mobile metadata, like the user's location, who they called, who they messaged, and so on. You might not be aware of this, but it's totally possible to recover data that you technically deleted on an operating system. When you delete a file, it's actually just removing the link to a memory location for you to access, and the space is available for other files to use as it's needed. With forensics tools, we can actually recover a lot of this information with data recovery. If you want a good exercise in digital forensics or to practice, go buy a computer hard drive off of eBay and see what you can uncover. Remember though, you can't unsee things once you see them. The idea of strategic intelligence is that you can use the information that you collect to create long-term plans and goals. In our case, the information that we collect in digital forensics can be used to create long-term cybersecurity goals. Goals include things like increasing our cyber resiliency and improving our security posture. Attackers use counterintelligence because they're trying to defeat our plans and goals by using their own strategic intelligence techniques.